State Exposure. Episode 1, Black Rain. One rainy night in Austin, Texas. The rain wasn't the kind that brought renewal. It was the kind that seeped into the cracks of a city already broken, dripping into the dark corners where secrets festered. Neon lights flickered off puddles, casting distorted reflections that danced across empty streets. In the middle of it all sat a man in an unmarked car, watching the world like he knew something it didn't. His name was Waller. To the outside world, he was just another ex-cop trying to make a living, running a couple of businesses, raising his kids. But the world didn't know Waller's truth. It didn't know about the demons that kept him up at night. 7 years in the Army, 3 tours overseas, 6 years as a police officer in Austin, Texas. A marriage shattered by betrayal, lies, and a wife who had a child with another man. 4 kids caught in the middle. And beneath it all, a man haunted by his past and terrified of his future. Because Waller wasn't just battling enemies on the outside, he was battling himself. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat, pulling him out of his thoughts. A message flashed on the screen. They know. Get out now. Dre. Andre Dre Williams, an old friend from the Army. The kind of friend who knew where the bodies were buried, because he'd helped bury them. Waller stared at the message, his pulse quickening. In his world, warnings like that weren't just threats. They were promises. Waller had built a life after the badge. Legit businesses on the surface. But underneath? Money hidden in places the IRS hadn't found. Yet, taxes unpaid. Paper trails blurred just enough to stay out of sight, but not enough to quiet the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. Because Waller knew the truth. The government always catches up. And when they did, it wouldn't be with a knock on the door. It'd be with a battering ram. But tonight wasn't about taxes or hidden money. It was about survival. Waller's mind drifted back to the times he sat in his office, staring at financial ledgers that didn't add up, wondering if this would be the day the feds showed up. Every knock at the door felt like a countdown. Every letter in the mail, a potential subpoena. He'd built these businesses to create a future for his kids, but the shortcuts and hidden income painted a target on his back, and he knew it. But this was different. This wasn't about shady books or late taxes. This was something deeper, something that reached back into a part of his life he thought was long buried. Flashback to Kandahar, Afghanistan, years ago. The sun baked the earth, turning the ground into cracked glass. Waller, younger but already carrying the weight of a man twice his age, adjusted his gear. His unit moved through the outpost with practiced precision, but Waller's instincts were screaming. Something was wrong. Colonel James Grayson, their commanding officer, handed out orders with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're pulling an asset from enemy territory," Grayson said. But Waller wasn't buying it. The mission details didn't add up. The intel was too clean, too convenient, and Waller had seen this before. This wasn't about saving anyone. It was about covering tracks the government didn't want anyone following. Waller had seen firsthand how missions like these ended. Bodies buried in unmarked graves, stories rewritten, soldiers sent home with medals for actions they couldn't speak about. He'd kept his mouth shut back then, but the guilt never left. It clung to him like the dust of Kandahar, a reminder that sometimes survival came at a cost. That was the first time Waller realized the war wasn't just overseas. It was everywhere, and sometimes the enemy wore the same uniform. Back in Waller's apartment, Waller's apartment was a reflection of the man himself. Cold, empty, and full of shadows. No family photos, no reminders of what was lost. Just a laptop, a bottle of bourbon, and enough silence to drown in. He plugged in the USB Dre had given him, expecting dirt on small-time players. Maybe some corrupt politicians or dirty cops. But what popped up on the screen made his blood run cold. Classified military files, operations that were supposed to be buried in the sands of Afghanistan. Names of soldiers he'd fought beside, some of them dead, others missing. But deeper in the files, it got worse. Photos of politicians shaking hands with known criminals, high-ranking military officials in bed with cartels, CIA operatives orchestrating chaos both abroad and at home. And right there, in the middle of it all, if you're hooked on deep state exposure, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future episodes packed with even more twists and turns. Waller. A grainy photo of him standing over a body in a desert he didn't remember being in. The timestamp was from a mission that, according to official records, never happened. But the worst part, in the corner of the photo was Colonel James Grayson, the man Waller thought was dead. Waller leaned back in his chair, the bourbon burning his throat, but doing nothing to ease the knot in his stomach. His mind raced through every mission, every encounter with Grayson. Had he been a pawn all along? Was everything he'd fought for just part of a larger game? Waller had spent years trying to outrun his past, but now it had caught up. And the worst part, he wasn't sure who was pulling the strings. The demons he'd been fighting weren't just in his head. They were real, and they were coming for him. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every sound, potential intruder. Waller had faced death before, but this felt different. This was personal. Back at the police station, the station buzzed with the usual chaos. Phones ringing, officers barking orders, criminals shouting about their innocence. But Waller walked through it all like a ghost. He wasn't here for small talk. Captain Elena Vargas was waiting. She didn't say a word as she slid a file across her desk. Waller opened it, and his heart sank. Dre, dead, bullet between the eyes. "Your informant?" Vargas asked, her voice like a blade. "Found him this morning. You've got a lot of friends in high places, Waller, but not high enough." Waller didn't flinch. He'd seen too much to be rattled that easily. But Vargas leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing. "You think you know who the enemy is?" she whispered. "You don't. And when you find out, it'll be too late." Waller's jaw tightened. He could see the unspoken accusation in Vargas's eyes. She knew something, but whether she was friend or foe was still unclear. The line between ally and enemy was blurring fast. Waller always thought he knew who to trust. But what if the people he worked with weren't on his side? What if the businesses he built were being watched? What if the government wasn't just trying to control him, they were trying to erase him? The thought gnawed at him. Every transaction, every hidden dollar, could be the thread that unraveled his entire life. The fear wasn't just about being caught, it was about being silenced. The local newsroom, across town. Across town, Jasmine Ortiz stared at her computer screen, her heart pounding in her chest. She was young, ambitious, and hungry for the story that would put her name on the map. But the story she'd just stumbled onto? This wasn't just career-defining. It was life-threatening. An anonymous email had popped up in her inbox. Subject line: "You think you know the government? don't know Waller. Attached was the same photo Waller had seen on his USB. But Jasmine didn't realize how deep the story went. This wasn't just about one man. It was about a system designed to protect itself at any cost. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, debating whether to dig deeper. She knew the risks, but the truth was too big to ignore. Little did she know, the moment she opened that file, her life would change forever. Waller's apartment, later that night. Waller stared at the photo on his laptop, his mind racing. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered without hesitation. "You're in deep, Waller," a distorted voice whispered. "Walk away, or you'll end up like Dre." But Waller didn't walk away, because he knew the truth now. The real war wasn't fought overseas. It was fought here, in the shadows of power. And the people pulling the strings, they were closer than he ever imagined. His reflection in the darkened screen stared back at him. A man who had lost everything, but wasn't ready to give up. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The room was dimly lit, a single lamp casting long shadows against the walls. Waller sat at his desk, staring at the laptop screen that refused to give him peace. The images of Colonel James Grayson, the classified files, and Dre's lifeless body burned into his mind. His hands hovered over the keyboard, hesitating. He had spent years burying secrets, yet now they were clawing their way back to the surface. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Another warning. "You had your chance to walk away, Waller. You should have taken it." The voice was distorted, synthetic, but the message was clear. The walls were closing in. Waller took a deep breath, gripping the whiskey glass beside him. His instincts told him one thing: run. But he had never been one to run. Not from war. Not from the badge. And sure as hell not from whoever was trying to erase him. He stared out the window, scanning the empty street below. Was someone watching him right now? Was this just another scare tactic, or had the noose finally tightened? The flickering streetlights outside cast eerie, shifting shadows against the pavement. A black sedan was parked across the street, its tinted windows revealing nothing, but its presence unsettled him. It hadn't been there before. His mind flashed back to his time overseas, missions where he had to disappear in an instant, making choices that still haunted him. But this wasn't a war zone. This was home. And yet, somehow, it felt just as hostile. Waller had spent his life living by a code, a soldier's code, a cop's code. But now, that code was meaningless. There were no sides in this fight, no badge to protect him, no flag to fight for. The only thing that mattered now was survival and the truth. His business dealings had already put him under scrutiny. Late tax filings, missing funds, paper trails that didn't add up. He had always assumed that if the government came after him, it would be for the money. But now, he was realizing that his past had caught up in ways he had never expected. The tangled web of his military past and his current life was closing in. He scrolled through his emails, his fingers tightening around the mouse as he clicked open an anonymous message. The subject line read, "You don't know who you're dealing with." Inside, there was nothing but a single attachment. He hesitated before opening it, his gut telling him this wasn't just another threat. It was a surveillance photo of him, taken from across the street, time-stamped 2 hours ago. Waller felt a cold sweat forming on the back of his neck. Someone wasn't just watching him. They were closing in. Flashback to Kandahar, Afghanistan, 2012. The sun was setting, casting the rugged terrain in a dull, reddish glow. Waller's boots crunched over gravel as he and his team moved in formation, silent but efficient. The mission was supposed to be simple: extract a high-value target codenamed Cobra and return to base. But Waller had a bad feeling. The intel was thin, and Grayson's orders were too perfect. It felt like a setup. "Stay on mission." Grayson's voice crackled through his earpiece. "No matter what." They pushed forward into an abandoned village, the air thick with the scent of burning fuel. The target was supposed to be inside a crumbling compound, but something felt off. Gunfire erupted from the ridgeline. "Ambush!" Waller shouted as bullets rained down. The team scrambled for cover behind broken walls, returning fire. Waller's heart pounded as he assessed the situation. This wasn't just a lucky hit. They had been expected. "Move right, through the alley," he ordered, leading his men through the winding corridors of the village. That's when he saw it. A partially collapsed structure, concealing a hidden bunker. "Stack up," Waller commanded, signaling his men to breach. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of metal and dust. The glow of emergency lights illuminated stacks of classified documents, maps, and hard drives. This wasn't just a meeting point. It was an intelligence hub. And then he saw him. Cobra, bound to a chair, bruised, but smirking despite his condition. "Took you long enough," he rasped. "You have no idea what you just walked into." The radio buzzed with an urgent message from Dre. "Waller, get out now. Chopper's inbound." Waller clenched his jaw, cutting Cobra's restraints. "You're coming with me." Cobra laughed dryly. "I don't think you understand. Saving me just made you the next target." Explosions rocked the compound as Waller hauled Cobra to his feet. Whatever they had just stepped into, it was bigger than anything they had been told. Back in the newsroom, Jasmine Ortiz clicked through the files on her computer, her fingers shaking as she scrolled past the images of Waller, of military operations that never happened. She had received anonymous tips before, but nothing like this. Her phone rang. Unknown caller. She hesitated, then answered. "You want the truth?" The voice on the other end whispered. "Meet me at Warehouse 14, 3 a.m. Come alone." Jasmine's heart pounded. She knew the risks, but something told her she was already in too deep to back out now. Warehouse 14 during the night. Jasmine parked a block away, gripping the steering wheel. She had covered dangerous stories before, but this one felt different. This wasn't about corruption or politics. This was something deeper. She clutched the pepper spray in her pocket and approached the warehouse. A flickering light buzzed above the entrance. The door creaked open slightly, as if someone had been expecting her. Inside, the smell of rust and oil filled her lungs. A figure emerged from the shadows. "My name's Vargas," he said, lowering his hood. His face was lined with scars, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "And if you don't start listening real carefully, you're going to end up just like Waller." She swallowed. Waller's alive. For now. Back at Waller's apartment. Waller sat in the darkness, his gun resting on the table beside him. His mind raced. The past was no longer staying buried. He had to act, and he had to act fast. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It rang once, twice, Then finally, a voice he never thought he'd hear again. "Took you long enough?" Waller clenched his jaw. "I need your help." There was a pause. Then the voice on the other end chuckled. "Yeah, I bet you do." The voice on the other end belonged to Marcus Chen, Waller's former handler from his classified missions. A man who disappeared so completely 5 years ago that even the shadows couldn't find him. "Thought you were dead," Waller said, his voice tight. That was the point. Chen's voice was harder than Waller remembered. "Dre reached out last week. Said you were about to step in something you couldn't get out of." Waller's grip tightened on the phone. "They killed him, Marcus." "I know, but you don't know why." A pause. "The photo they have of you, the one in the desert. Tell me you haven't shown it to anyone." "How do you?" "Because if you have, they're already dead. In Jasmine's car that night." Jasmine's hands trembled as she started her car. Vargas's words echoed in her mind. "Your father didn't die in any training accident. He found something. Something about Operation Sandstorm." Her rearview mirror caught movement. Headlights. A black SUV pulling out behind her. Waller's apartment. Continuous conversation with Chen. "Operation Sandstorm?" Waller asked, the name triggering something in his memory. "That was Grayson's op, the one that went bad." "No," Chen replied. "Sandstorm was a cover. The real operation was called Black Rain. And that photo you have, it proves it was never about terrorism. It was about something else. Something they buried in that desert." "What are you talking about?" "The coordinates, Waller. Look at the coordinates in the background of that photo. Those numbers weren't random." Waller pulled up the image, zooming in. Behind him, in the grainy background, a series of numbers were barely visible on a wall. 30 degrees, 15 minutes, 47.8 degrees north. 97 degrees, 44 minutes, 1.7 degrees west. "That's here," Waller breathed. "In Austin." "Now you're getting it. Whatever they were moving through Afghanistan, they brought it home. And Cobra, he knew where they put it. Austin city streets." Jasmine's car weaved through traffic, the black SUV staying 3 cars behind. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Your father left something in his safety deposit box. Get it before they do." Back at the police station, Captain Vargas's office. Elena Vargas stared at her computer screen, security footage showing Waller's conversation with Jasmine playing silently. Her phone rang. "Is it done?" The voice was distorted. "The journalist took the bait. She's heading to the bank now." "And Waller?" "He's talking to Chen." A pause. "That's impossible. Chen is dead." "Apparently not. He's been waiting, planning." "Then we're blown. Initiate Protocol 0. Burn it all." Waller's apartment. Continuous conversation with Chen. "Listen carefully." Chen's voice had dropped to a whisper. "In 1 hour, every digital record of Black Rain will disappear. Servers will crash. Files will corrupt. They're cleaning house." "Why now?" "Because of what's in that safety deposit box. General Ortiz didn't just keep records. He kept proof. DNA samples, test results, the kind of evidence that could bring down governments." Waller's mind raced. "The journalist, Jasmine. She's Ortiz's daughter. And she's walking into a trap. They're going to use her to flush you out." make you choose between saving her or saving yourself. Arriving at First National Bank, Jasmine pulled into the bank's parking lot, her heart pounding. The black SUV circled the block, waiting. Her phone buzzed again. You have 10 minutes. After that, Waller dies. Waller's apartment, continuous conversation with Jen. I won't let them kill another innocent person, Waller said, checking his weapon. You go in there, you're giving them exactly what they want. Chen's voice was urgent. This isn't about saving one life anymore. This is about exposing the truth. The truth? Waller laughed bitterly. The truth got Dre killed, got Ortiz killed. The truth is a bullet between the eyes. The truth is whatever was in that desert, whatever they brought back, whatever made Colonel Grayson turn his gun on his own men. Waller froze. What did you just say? Check the back of the photo, Waller. The real one. The one Cobra slipped into your pocket before they executed him. Waller's hands shook as he pulled out his wallet, removing a worn photograph hidden behind his military ID. On the back, in faded ink, Project Oracle. They made us gods, then they made us monsters. Inside First National Bank, Jasmine entered the bank, the night guard nodding as she passed. Behind her, men in suits began moving into position. Back in Waller's car. Waller gripped the steering wheel, Chen's words playing in his mind. Sometimes, the only way to expose the truth is to let them think they've won. His phone buzzed. A message from Captain Vargas. Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. Some secrets need to stay buried. But it was the second message that made his blood run cold. A photo of his kids at school, taken an hour ago. Inside the bank vault, Jasmine's hands trembled as she inserted the key into safety deposit box 2247, her father's last secret. Behind her, the bank manager shifted nervously, checking his watch. Inside the box lay a single USB drive and a handwritten note. The truth about Project Oracle isn't in the desert. It's under Austin. Follow the money, Dad. Back in Waller's car, Waller's tires squealed as he rounded the corner toward the bank. His phone rang again. Chen. Don't do it, Chen warned. It's exactly what they want. They're watching my kids, Marcus. Listen to me. Whatever's on that drive, it's bigger than all of us. If they get their hands on it. The explosion rocked the night, the shockwave rattling Waller's windshield. Flames erupted from the bank's upper floors. Jesus Christ, Waller breathed. Smoke poured through the ventilation system. Jasmine clutched the drive to her chest, coughing. The bank manager lay unconscious, or worse, by the vault door. Her phone buzzed one last time. Thank you for making this easy. Veet. Waller pulled up as people streamed from the building. Fire trucks wailed in the distance. Through the smoke, he caught glimpses of men in tactical gear entering through a side door. His phone buzzed. A video message from an unknown number. He pressed play. The footage showed his kid's school. Empty hallways, a classroom door. Inside, his youngest daughter Madison sat at her desk, unaware she was being watched. The message below read, "Choice time, Waller. The girl or the drive. You have 3 minutes." Jasmine heard footsteps approaching through the smoke. Military precision, not firefighters. She pulled out her phone, quickly copying what she could from the drive to a secure cloud account. The footsteps grew closer. Waller checked his weapon, mind racing. 3 minutes. He could get to the school in 7. Unless... He dialed Sarah Martinez's number. "I need a favor," he said, when she answered. "My daughter Madison." "Already on it," Sarah cut in. "Got eyes on the school. No one's getting near her." Waller allowed himself a breath. "I owe you." "Yeah, you do. Now go get that drive before they kill that reporter." The smoke was thickening when Waller found her. Jasmine had wedged herself behind a filing cabinet, pepper spray in one hand, drive in the other. "You're a hard man to trust, Mr. Waller," she said, eyes narrowing. "We don't have time for trust. Those men coming down that hallway, they're here to kill us both." A burst of gunfire emphasized his point, bullets sparking off the vault door. "The drive," she said. "My father died for what's on it. And my daughter dies if they get it." Waller's voice was raw. "So what's it going to be?" Jasmine stared at him for a long moment. Then she held out the drive. "There's something you should know," she said as he took it. "I made a copy." Sarah Martinez moved silently through the empty school, gun drawn. A shadow moved at the end of the hall, a man in tactical gear checking classrooms. Her phone vibrated. A text from Waller. "Got the drive. Get Madison out. Now." The gunmen were close now. Waller could hear them clearing rooms, getting closer. "There's another way out," he told Jasmine. "Maintenance tunnel. Runs under the whole block." "How do you know that?" Waller managed a grim smile. "Because I used to rob banks before I protected them. Outside First National Bank." Captain Vargas watched from across the street as smoke billowed from the building. Her phone rang. "Status?" The distorted voice demanded. "Waller's inside. We're containing the situation." "And the drive?" "Won't matter soon. The EMP is ready. 10-block radius. Everything goes dark." "Including the evidence we need?" "Sometimes you have to burn the village to save it." Inside the maintenance tunnel. Waller and Jasmine splashed through ankle-deep water. Behind them, boots echoed on metal stairs. The gunmen had found the tunnel entrance. "Whatever's on this drive," Waller said, "whatever Project Oracle really is, they're willing to kill everyone to keep it quiet." "It's not about what Project Oracle is," Jasmine replied. "It's about what it made possible. My father found proof. They're using it right here in Austin. On civilians." Before Waller could respond, every light in the tunnel went dark. The EMP had hit. In the pitch black, a familiar voice echoed off the walls. "Hello, Jack," Colonel Grayson said. "We need to talk about Kandahar." To be continued. The truth is unraveling faster than Waller can control. Secrets are being exposed, and betrayal is just around the corner. What will happen next? Will Waller make it out alive, or is the truth too dangerous to uncover? Tune in for the next explosive episode of Deep State Exposure. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications, because you won't want to miss what's coming.